Ladies and gentlemen, close your eyes for a moment and feel the pulse of an ancient land, a land where rivers flow with stories, mountains echo timeless chants, and the air hums with wisdom passed down through millennia. This is not just geography, it is the soul of a civilization, vast and unbroken. Today, we awaken that soul, the dream of Akhand Bharat. It is a journey beyond borders, beyond politics, into the heart of a shared spirit that still lives within us all. Stay with me because this isn't just history, it's a living, breathing call to unity and awakening. Akhand Bharat refers to the idea of an undivided or unified India, a concept deeply rooted in the subcontinent's civilizational memory. It envisions a culturally and spiritually integrated Indian subcontinent that includes not only present-day India, but also countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and parts of Afghanistan and Myanmar. The term Akhand means unbroken or whole, while Bharat is the ancient Sanskrit name for India. Together, the term represents a vision of unity that transcends modern political borders. This concept does not strictly imply political unification under one government. Rather, it emphasizes a shared civilizational identity that was prevalent long before the colonial era and the subsequent partition of the region. Historically, the Indian subcontinent functioned as a cultural and spiritual ecosystem, tied together through common languages like Sanskrit and Pali, religious philosophies such as Sanatana Dharma, Buddhism, and Jainism, and deeply rooted traditions in art, music, science, and governance. The idea of Akhand Bharat draws from this shared heritage and the interconnectedness of societies across the region. It reflects a sense of collective historical consciousness and cultural affinity that many believe was artificially disrupted by colonial rule and later reinforced by geopolitical divisions. The emphasis is on cultural cohesion, not territorial expansion. Akhand Bharat also represents an aspirational framework within which people of the region may reconnect through cultural exchange, spiritual philosophy, and historical continuity. It challenges the narrative that these nations were always distinct and separate entities, suggesting instead that they are different expressions of the same ancient civilization. The idea continues to inspire both reverence and controversy, as it touches upon sensitive questions of identity, sovereignty, and history across South Asia. Before the rise of modern nation-states and colonial interventions, the Indian subcontinent functioned as a unified civilizational space. This unity was not based on political control under a single ruler at all times, but on a shared cultural, spiritual, and philosophical foundation that connected diverse regions and communities across thousands of years. From the Vedic age to the era of great empires like the Mauryas, Guptas, and even the Mughals, the subcontinent displayed a remarkable continuity in traditions, knowledge systems, and moral values. Religious and philosophical systems such as Sanatana Dharma, Buddhism, Jainism, and later Sikhism emerged from the same soil and coexisted, often influencing one another. These traditions emphasized concepts like dharma, karma, and moksha, which shaped the social and ethical framework across regions. Sanskrit and later Pali served as unifying languages of scripture, philosophy, and scholarship, allowing for the transmission of knowledge across vast distances and diverse communities. Trade routes, pilgrimage paths, and learning centers like Takshashila, Nalanda, and Vikramashila further reinforced the interconnectedness of the subcontinent. Goods, ideas, and people moved freely, creating a vibrant civilizational network that transcended linguistic and regional differences. The spread of epics like the Ramayana and Mahabharata in various regional languages also demonstrates the shared mythological and moral imagination across this broad geography. This civilizational unity was not dependent on rigid centralization, but was rooted in a decentralized yet harmonized cultural ecosystem. Rulers and kingdoms came and went, but the underlying ethos remained largely intact. Whether in the form of temple architecture, classical music, social customs, or philosophical debates, there existed a continuous thread of cultural identity that wove the subcontinent into a singular civilizational whole. This unity was sustained by common spiritual values and a deep reverence for knowledge, nature, and human life. The unity of the Indian subcontinent was deeply disrupted by colonial intervention, particularly under British rule. The British Empire systematically fragmented the region both physically and psychologically to serve its own strategic and economic interests. Using the policy of divide and rule, colonial administrators deepened religious, linguistic, and regional differences that had previously coexisted within a larger civilizational framework. One of the most significant tools of fragmentation was the political reorganization of the subcontinent. The British drew artificial boundaries and created administrative units that often ignored historical, cultural, and linguistic realities. These divisions not only reshaped the political map, but also planted the seeds of identity-based conflict. The establishment of separate electorates for Hindus and Muslims, and the categorization of communities into rigid groups through census classifications, intensified communal identities that were previously more fluid. The educational and legal systems introduced by the British further alienated people from their indigenous roots. Traditional centers of learning were undermined, and English education created a new class of elites who were often disconnected from local culture and history. This eroded the organic unity of the subcontinent and replaced it with a structure that prioritized colonial control over indigenous cohesion. The partition of Bengal in 1905 and the eventual partition of India in 1947 were the most visible outcomes of this fragmentation. These events were not simply political reconfigurations, but also represented a psychological breaking of a once unified civilization. The drawing of new borders, accompanied by mass violence and displacement, led to deep and lasting mistrust between communities and neighboring nations. Colonial policies not only dismantled the administrative unity of the region, but also weakened the shared civilizational consciousness. By encouraging divisiveness, the British ensured that post-independence South Asia would remain fractured, both geographically and in terms of identity, making the dream of unity appear distant and difficult. The idea of Akhand Bharat represents more than a geographic vision. It signals the resurgence of a civilizational identity that predates modern nation-states and colonial influence. This resurgence challenges established global narratives and disrupts the intellectual and cultural dominance of the West. It represents a shift from imposed ideologies to indigenous thought systems rooted in spirituality, pluralism, and ancient wisdom. The fear surrounding this resurgence is not just about political power, but about the reemergence of a world that cannot be easily controlled or assimilated. India's civilizational legacy is grounded in concepts like Dharma, Satya, and Ahimsa, which form a moral and philosophical framework very different from materialist or expansionist ideologies. A revival of these principles at a large scale represents a fundamental challenge to global systems that prioritize profit, competition, and individualism. When India asserts its cultural and philosophical identity, it offers an alternative to the prevailing global order, one that focuses on inner growth, balance, and collective well-being. This resurgence is also seen in India's growing influence through soft power. Practices like yoga, Ayurveda, meditation, and Vedic philosophy are being adopted globally, reflecting a shift in interest toward ancient Indian knowledge systems. As more people across the world explore these practices, the fear among global powers is that India's cultural model might gain widespread appeal and undermine dominant Western paradigms. The notion of India reconnecting with its neighbors through shared history and culture adds to this concern. A civilizational alliance in South Asia based on mutual respect, cultural memory, and philosophical unity could realign regional politics and economic strategies. This would reduce reliance on external powers and encourage a self-sufficient regional identity, which many outside actors view as a potential threat to their influence and strategic interests in the region. The idea of Akhand Bharat is primarily rooted in soft power rather than hard power. Unlike military expansion or territorial conquest, which define traditional forms of hard power, this vision draws its strength from cultural influence, philosophical thought, and spiritual heritage. It seeks to inspire and unify through shared values, not through force or domination. This makes it more subtle and enduring, and in many ways more difficult to resist or suppress. India's soft power has always been one of its most significant assets. From the global popularity of yoga and Ayurveda to the widespread influence of Indian music, cinema, and cuisine, India has extended its reach not through armies, but through ideas and traditions. This soft power is deeply civilizational. It is rooted in ancient wisdom that transcends borders, offering a holistic view of life, society, and human purpose. It appeals to people at a deeper level, addressing the need for meaning and balance in an increasingly fragmented world. The civilizational dream of Akhand Bharat leverages this influence by emphasizing the shared cultural and spiritual heritage of the Indian subcontinent. This includes common religious philosophies, linguistic traditions, epics, festivals, and social values that connect communities across national boundaries. Unlike hard power, which often breeds resistance and fear, soft power fosters curiosity, admiration, and voluntary engagement. What makes this form of influence powerful and threatening to some global players is its ability to shape mindsets and redefine identity. Soft power operates silently but effectively, encouraging people to reconnect with their roots, question dominant narratives, and imagine a different future. In the context of Akhand Bharat, this means the potential for a renewed sense of unity across South Asia that is not enforced but embraced, not imposed by governments but awakened in the consciousness of people. The realization of Akhand Bharat as a civilizational idea carries significant strategic implications, both regionally and globally. A culturally unified South Asia, connected by shared history, spiritual values, and social customs, could emerge as a powerful geopolitical force. Such unity would shift the balance of power in the region and challenge existing global structures that have long benefited from a fragmented Indian subcontinent. Currently, South Asia remains divided not just by borders but by conflicting national interests, historical grievances, and external influences. This division allows global powers to maintain leverage in the region, often playing one country against another for strategic or economic gain. The idea of Akhand Bharat disrupts this dynamic. A united civilizational consciousness across the region would reduce dependency on external actors, foster regional cooperation, and create a stronger, more self-reliant bloc. In global terms, this could reshape trade routes, energy partnerships, defense alliances, and diplomatic priorities. A cohesive South Asia could control significant sea lanes, influence international organizations, and negotiate from a position of collective strength rather than individual vulnerability. It could also serve as a counterweight to dominant blocs like NATO, the European Union, or China's Belt and Road Initiative. The civilizational unity behind Akhand Bharat is not limited to political or economic integration. It promotes a world that challenges materialist ideologies and emphasizes balance, sustainability, and human values. If adopted at scale, such a shift could influence how nations approach development, conflict resolution, and environmental responsibility. The strategic consequences of such a transformation make many global players uneasy. They recognize that a united South Asian identity, driven by shared culture rather than coercion, could reduce Western and other external influences while asserting a uniquely indigenous model of governance, diplomacy, and progress. This makes the vision of Akhand Bharat a matter of serious international interest. The vision of Akhand Bharat faces strong opposition from both neighboring countries and major global powers due to its potential to shift regional and global power dynamics. For many, the idea evokes fears of cultural dominance, political integration, or even territorial ambition, despite its foundation being largely philosophical and cultural rather than militaristic. These concerns stem from historical experiences, current geopolitical tensions, and the desire of other powers to maintain influence in South Asia. Neighboring countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh often view the concept through the lens of post-colonial identity and partition trauma. To them, any call for unity rooted in shared civilizational pasts can appear as a threat to their national sovereignty and distinct identities. This fear is further amplified by political narratives within India that sometimes mix civilizational pride with aggressive nationalism, making it harder for neighbors to separate cultural connection from political assertion. China also views the idea with caution. A culturally cohesive South Asia could act as a counterbalance to its regional ambitions, particularly in areas like infrastructure, trade, and defense. China's interests are best served by maintaining strategic divisions among South Asian nations, and a revival of unity based on cultural and civilizational common ground undermines that goal. Western powers have their own reasons for concern. Their historical influence in the region, along with ongoing economic and military partnerships, rely on a fragmented South Asia. A unified cultural or ideological identity, even without political unification, reduces the space for Western-led narratives, interventions, and alliances. Opposition to Akhand Bharat is thus rooted not only in fears of revisionist politics, but in the deeper realization that a culturally awakened and interconnected South Asia could operate independently of global superpowers. This potential independence and internal cohesion make the idea both powerful and threatening to those who benefit from the current divisions. The concept of Akhand Bharat is often misunderstood as a form of extreme nationalism or expansionism, but at its core, it is about civilizational identity rather than political dominance. Nationalism typically revolves around modern political borders, centralized governance, and often a strong assertion of state power. In contrast, civilizational identity is rooted in shared history, cultural continuity, spiritual values, and philosophical traditions that have evolved over millennia across a broad region. Civilizational identity does not seek to erase existing nations or their sovereignty. It recognizes the diversity within the Indian subcontinent as part of a larger cultural and spiritual fabric. Countries like Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and even parts of Afghanistan and Myanmar share historical, religious, and linguistic ties with India that predate colonial boundaries. These connections form through trade, migration, philosophy, and shared epics such as the Ramayana and Mahabharata, which are woven into the cultural memory of multiple nations. Unlike nationalism, which can become exclusionary and aggressive, civilizational identity emphasizes inclusion, plurality, and mutual respect. It does not rely on a singular race, religion, or language, but acknowledges the unity within diversity that has defined the region for centuries. This idea is deeply embedded in concepts like Dharma and Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which advocate harmony, duty, and universal kinship. By drawing on these values, Akhand Bharat presents a model where unity is not enforced through political power, but discovered through cultural alignment and spiritual resonance. It suggests that the region's strength lies not in uniformity, but in its ability to stay connected through a common heritage. Civilizational identity therefore serves as a deeper and more enduring foundation for regional understanding, offering a path toward collective upliftment without the need for confrontation or territorial ambition. Akhand Bharat is not a political ambition, but a civilizational awakening, a reminder of shared roots, timeless values, and spiritual unity. It is the return of a collective memory long buried under borders, conflict, and colonial fragmentation. The world fears it not because it seeks conquest, but because it revives a truth beyond control, that a united, conscious civilization can rise without violence through wisdom, culture, and inner strength. Thank you for your time, your presence, and your spirit. Walk with pride, speak with purpose, and remember the past is calling, and the future is listening. Good luck.